Karen.
Alderman Kerrigan.
Karen.
Councillor Lillian Sonoya Barr.
Karen.
Councillor Boyle. Kayla.
Apologies, Karen.
Okay. Councillor Sean Carr.
Here, Karen.
Councillor Duffy.
And Shaw.
Councillor Edwards.
And Shaw, Karen.
Councillor Farrell.
Here.
Councillor Ferguson.
Here, Karen.
Councillor Fleming.
Shaw, Karen.
Councillor Harkin. Councillor Harkin. Not yet. Councillor McGinley.
And Shaw, Karen.
And Councillor Tierney. And I should have acknowledged, Chair, there is a prior apology from Alderman Guy, who's not going to be in attendance. So can I just double check again, Councillor Harkin? Okay, thank you.
Karen, I'm here as well, Councillor Tierney.
Yes, no, I've ticked you off, sorry. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you, Karen, and thanks to everybody for joining the meeting. If I could read out the broadcast statement, please. I would like to remind everyone who's in remote attendance that this meeting will be broadcast live via the Council's YouTube channel and will be available for viewing by the public and media. Broadcast will also be available for repeated viewing at a later date. This broadcast may be terminated or suspended in accordance with Council protocol. Members and approved speakers are reminded to only have their mics and cameras on while speaking at the meeting and to use the chat facility to highlight a request to speak. By participating in this meeting, you are consenting to being filmed and to the use and storage of those images for broadcasting or training purposes and for the purpose of keeping historical records and making those records available to the public. A copy of the Council privacy notice may be found on the Council website, www.derrystrabane.com. Folks, item 4, declaration of members' interests, either now or in the chat box, please, or even if you could put it in the chat box as well for the note takers. Moving on to item 5, chairperson's business. I have 3 people in terms of chairperson's business and 4 items. First up is Councillor Ferguson. Rachel, please.
Thank you, Chair. Chair, I'd like to raise an issue that has been brought to light by some of the local animal rescue charities. Firstly, Chair, I want to start by saying I think the work currently being done by our animal welfare officer is great work. The concern I and the local charities have is purely a resource and a lack of it. Did you know, Chair, that the charities have made me aware that they know that there's only 2 welfare officers who are covering the majority of Northern Ireland. Our own welfare officer has a responsibility looking out after Mid-Ulster, Omagh, Fermanagh, as well as our city and district. I've been informed our officer is working currently really hard with 500 open welfare cases and he's trying to deal with. This is whilst juggling all these areas. If there was a cause for concern for an animal in an abandoned house, the officer would come down here on a selected day and put tape on the door to see if it's moved, and then come back the following week to see if it's moved. But that takes a long time, and unfortunately the dog could end up, or the cat could end up dying in that period of time. At this point, even our dog wardens couldn't interject until the welfare officer has completed their investigation. Another example I was given was of a poodle who was found and brought to a local rescue. The dog's fur had become so matted it couldn't walk without being in agony. The charity informed the welfare officer that the dog had been severely neglected and they were waiting for them to come and see the dog. In the wait, the staff could not justify letting the dog wait in pain, so they had an emergency groomer attend late that night. They recorded before, during and after the dog had been groomed. They weighed the fur and they took the dog to the vets and got a statement of malnutrition and neglect from the vet. But when the officer came down, they informed the charity that they legally could not seize the dog due to the due to them taking that action, because the officer had not seen the dog in the state it was when it first came. Chair, I'm not blaming our welfare officer here. They have a huge work to deal with. What I'm asking for, though, is that we as a council possibly bring forward a paper on our animal welfare team, whether that needs to be a dedicated officer for our city and district, or it has to be, maybe we give our wardens more authority in working with partnership with the welfare team, like attending calls when the officer is in other areas. I'm also asking, Chair, that the local charities would love to come in and attend committee and give us some information on what their biggest concerns are for our council and how we could possibly make things better as a council. So, Chair, could I propose that we have a paper come back on our current animal welfare and whether or not we are able to give our dog wardens more authority in supporting that welfare officer? And could we also invite the local animal rescue centres into committee at some point to present what their concerns are with animal welfare currently?
Thanking you, Councillor Ferguson. Thanking you, Rachel. If I could go back to council officer to pick up on in that the facilitated paper and the groups been asked in.
Yeah, absolutely, Chairman. We'll work out the logistics and come back to members with suitable dates.
Okay, appreciate that. Thank you, Karen. Members, in terms of the next two items, chairperson's business, it's actually our city solicitor, Philip, and these papers or these issues only came to light after the papers were already sent out for the committee. So if we can hear Philip out on these two issues. Philip, please.
Thank you, Chair. Members, this is just to advise in relation to two licensing applications that were dealt with by this committee. Firstly, and very briefly, just to advise that in respect of the amusement licence, in respect of the premises at 15 William Street, that an appeal against the decision of the committee has now been received, and that will be dealt with by the county court at a date in the future, which is yet to be fixed, and we'll keep members updated as that matter develops. Secondly, then, members, in respect of the entertainments licence, in respect of Danny O'Neill's Bar, as members will be aware, that was decision of the committee was appealed, and that has been a matter which has been being dealt with at the county court over the last number of weeks. We had a total of 4 days of hearing, with judgment in respect of that matter being handed down last Friday, and members can advise that the court decided to grant an entertainment licence to the appellant, but on based on certain restrictions. Namely that the licence will only be granted in respect of Thursday, Friday, Saturday and Sunday nights. On Thursday nights it will be restricted to 11:30 p.m. On Fridays and Saturdays it will be restricted until 11:45 p.m. and on Sundays it will be restricted to 10:30 p.m. Additional conditions that were imposed by the court are that noise arising from entertainment on the premises is to be controlled so that it prevents persons in the neighbourhood from being unreasonably disturbed and is not to be audible within any neighbouring residential property between the hours of 12 midnight and 7 a.m. Secondly, that in respect of noise created outside the premises, the licensee is to take such measures as are necessary to minimise the noise created, to include announcements, notices, employment of door stewards and such other measures as may be required by the council. Thirdly, the licensee is to ensure that the public footpath outside the premises for a distance of 25 metres downhill from the front door and uphill to the junction with McLaughlin's Close is kept free from dirt and litter. And then finally, that in the event of any complaints being raised by the residents in relation to the entertainment of the premises, the council shall arrange for or facilitate mediation between the residents concerned and the licensee. Just I'm not sure if I mentioned members, but that license was granted for a period of 6 months, so as the matter could be kept under review, and if the problems persist and continue, could be further considered whenever the matter came up for renewal. Thank you, members.
Thank you. Can you hear me, Philip?
Yes, thanks, Chair. Yep.
Thanking you for that, Philip. I don't see anybody in the chat box, folks, in regards to Philip's update. And if people can maybe just say to me as well, because I'm back and forward to the chat box. So if people are content enough with the update, I'm going to move on to the fourth person and the third person and the fourth item under chairperson's business, and that is Councillor Seymour Barr. Lillian, please.
Thank you, Chair. And members, some of you may be aware that on the 21st of November, a fire broke out at the Sikh Gurdwara Temple and Cultural Center. The fire, which was caused by an electrical fault, caused considerable damage to every room in the building, including the kitchen and the main prayer room. The building is no longer habitable and it is no fit state to be used for worship or other community activities. This week, I met with some of the temple trustees and some of their community members who are devastated by the extensive damage that was caused by the fire. You will be aware that there are over 200 Sikhs living in the council area. The center, which was opened in 1995, acts as a community hub for the entire Sikh community in the Northwest, which is extended also to members of the community in Donegal. And it was used on a daily basis to host community activities and meetings for the many Sikh in Derry, particularly the elderly. It is the only place they can meet and socialize or even interact with other members of their community. But the fire meant that some of them are now housebound with no place to cater for their social needs. I understand that an average of 150 to 250 people come to meet or worship in the center. On special occasion, that number can go up to 300 people. Members, the fire did more than halt religious services taking place, and in line with this religious ethos of service to the community, the Gurdwara run a series of free food kitchens and prepare meals which are served to the people across the city. Essentially, the Sikh temple is open to and has served residents in this council area beyond the Sikh community itself. And the notion of service to the poor is deeply embedded in the Sikh religion, and the temple throughout the world supply hot, nutritious food to local people, usually twice a day, no question asked, and no one is ever turned away. And we have seen that happening here in our city. There is no special day in the Sikhism set aside for worship. Instead, every day is a day of worship or community gatherings. This means that the center is in constant use throughout the day and in the evenings. For all those reasons, the loss of the center is huge and is keenly felt by all the local Sikh community in Derry and in Donegal. And in light of the extensive damage caused by the fire and the central importance of the center to the Sikh community here, I would like to make a proposal that council follows officials meet urgently with the trustees of the Gurdwara temple to explore the options of finding a temporary building in which the Sikh community could hold their various activities. Council also should note that a longer-term solution is also required. Therefore, council writes to the Department for Communities seeking a meeting between departmental officials and representatives of the Sikh community in Derry. The purpose of the meeting will be to explore and discuss options for a new permanent Sikh temple and cultural center in Derry.
Thank you, Councillor Barr. There'll be a seconder for that, folks. Second by Councillor Ferguson. Rachel, thanking you, Rachel. And I don't see anybody not agreeing with it. Folks and council officers, take that on. Karen?
Yes, Chair. If Lillian would be kind enough just to give us the contact initially that she's spoken with, we'll pick it up and arrange for some follow-up discussions. Thank you.
Appreciate that. Thanking you, folks. That's chairperson's business, folks. If I could move on to item 6, which is the minutes of the open meeting of Health and Communities, the 11th of November. For accuracy, members, pages 1 to 36 for accuracy.
Chair
So
Morris.
proposed.
Chair, just one wee issue on accuracy, Chair. It's the attendance. I see present was people or members in the chamber and non-members of committee. I see the members of committee that were on virtually, including myself and Alderman Kerrigan, haven't been included in the minutes. And I'm sure maybe there might be other members who may have been on virtually.
I'd be the same. Councillor McGinley, I'm not included there. I was on virtually too.
Okay, folks, well spotted, and obviously will be put right in minutes in terms of accuracy. Is that okay, Karen?
Yes, we'll note that and make the amendment.
Okay, and just back, folks, I know somebody was so proposing. Have a name, please?
Brian Tierney.
And I'll second it, Chair. Alderman Devaney, if it needs seconded.
Seconded by Morris Devaney. Okay, Alderman Devaney, thank you. Okay, folks, moving on to any matters arising. Again, pages 1 to 36. Alderman Hussey.
Thank you, Chair, and not a member of the committee. Item 252, reopening of council facilities. In that, I had a query reference availability of showers at the Brandywell during matches, but subsequent to that, I've had queries from teams who would use Melvin for training. And the question I'm being asked is, are showers and changing facilities available to those teams who would train at Melvin? It was pointed out to me that there are teams there whose membership would have perhaps folk travelling from Inishowen, from beyond Dungannon, to team training for the particularly intermediate level and above, and that at times these players coming off after a training session on a wet evening find themselves unable to shower and clean up before they go home. So could I have an update on what the status is with regard to the use of showers and changing facilities at Melbourne, particularly on training? And secondly, I'm beginning to get some frustration locally with regard to the reopening of Derg Valley. And could we have an indication of a timeline as to when it's anticipated that that facility will be fully available again to local residents? Thank you, Chair.
Thanking you, Alderman Hussey. And before coming back to the officers, if I could also ask Alderman Kerrigan, Keith, on the same issue.
Thank you, Chair. And to be fair, I was going on to that again, the same issue, reopening council facilities, and it was going to be Derg Valley Leisure Centre. And in regards to when we will get any progress, there have been a few figures that I have been informed of, and whether that wants to be stated in open business or whether it's mentioned in confidential. But in regards to the costings, that has been mentioned to me personally there, and how much it will cost to get up and run again. But it's the case has been asked there to me about the main hall, and there have been a number of groups looking to use the main hall, and I think it is the steam rooms are also closed, and it's felt that the main hall merely has a couple of drilling holes which would not be difficult to fix. I think they all have been filled in, with the exception of one, which could potentially get it opened again. And it just seems to be quite a length of time since anything was done in it. And potentially we could be talking about September time since any work was taking place in it. So it's just trying to see what where the progress is, or maybe are you going to organise something with the Derg members? Thank you.
Okay, Alderman Kerrigan, if I could ask, obviously pick up on Alderman Hussain, Alderman Kerrigan's, please.
Chair, I'll ask Barry to pick up on the changing, and I'll pick up on Derg Valley.
Okay,
Thanks,
thank you.
Chair. Alderman Hussey, be it similar to the last update at the previous committee, yeah, sure, facilities and changings or facilities are open based to risk assessments with leagues and clubs. And if you want to send me through specifics about what teams didn't get access to particular facilities, I'll chase that up directly and get back to you tomorrow, Alderman Hussey, if you're happy enough with that. But yeah, they are open. Facilities are open, sure, they're open, subject to risk assessment. But if there has been a couple of issues with that and other facilities, if you can let me know, I'll follow up and get a detailed response out to all members on it.
Appreciate that, Barry. Thank you.
Thank you, Barry. Karen.
And Chair, in relation to Derg Valley, there have been a number of technical studies undertaken, and in fact, just in the last couple of days, we've received the final version of those, and we're convening a meeting with the relevant internal council departments, including property, capital, environmental health, and the technical consultants to discuss the implications of that. We have sought clarity, particularly in terms of the potential impact on reopening operations in the areas that you've referred to, including the sports hall. We haven't had a response back on that, but certainly within the next week or so, we would be hoping to be in a position to update members and then to formally, obviously, in tandem, update staff and our user base. So I'm sorry I can't be more specific because the technical report does require to be considered in detail by a number of sections within council.
Thank you, Karen. Okay, Alderman Kerrigan.
Thank you, Chair.
Chair.
Thank you, Karen.
Thank
Sure.
you.
Can I
In
just
terms of forever, is that the same item?
Same item, Chair, if that's okay.
That's okay. I'll come to yourself, Councillor Harkin, but you're a different item if I'm not mistaken. So the same item, Councillor Edwards.
Thanks, Chair, for letting me in. Karen, do we have a indicated cost of what the repairs will or have been, or has that been discussed already? Sorry, I was or joined the meeting now. But is there an indicated cost of the damage that's been done to Derg Valley Leisure Centre there? Because as you're aware, I spoke to you a few weeks ago on the issue as well. But I'm just wondering if they can be released or have they been released? Thank you.
Chair, until we see the final proposals for remediation of the site as determined by the consultants, we will not be in the position to give members a finite cost of the remedial works. So the meeting that I referred to needs to take place. We need to establish on the basis of that what the additional realms of works are. Some of those may indeed need to be costed as opposed to having an attributed fixed cost, and whether they can be provided or undertaken by the contractor that we have currently appointed remains to be seen based on the detail of the works taken on board. So we do not have a final cost, and I have to say, unless somewhere within the technical section there are detailed costs, there's nothing that I could circulate to you at this point in time beyond the cost of works undertaken. That's the most up-to-date position I have.
Thank you, Karen. Alderman Hussey, very quickly.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. I understand exactly what Karen's saying, and I suppose we in this chamber know that procedures and procurement policies and all of that sort of stuff has to be gone through. But I would urge urgency within putting all of that together. There is a growing frustration. The folk out there simply don't, well, some of them do, but a lot do not understand the hoops that have to be gone through. But let's get through those hoops as quickly as possible and as safely as possible, of course. So can I urge that the situation be expedited as quickly as possible? Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Alderman Hussey. On item HC250/21, Councillor Harkin. Sean.
Thanks, Chair. Appreciate it. Yeah, look, I think we're all aware of the tremendous pressures that our health service is under. And indeed, that last discussion, we spent a lot of time going through it with Western Trust officials. And I think we know that our health service workers have been under tremendous strain and have been basically non-stop now for the 2 years of the pandemic. And given the unfortunate rise of infections recently, it's just not easing up for them. And I think the council's well on record thanking the health workers for their sacrifices, efforts, and to keep people safe. And that's why I wanted to get it on record that my disappointment, and I think many other people's disappointment, that the health minister, with a full support, as far as I can tell, of the executive, is moving ahead now with the imposition of the 3% wage offer. And that has led to, I've talked to a lot of health service workers who are deeply, deeply frustrated about this. And it's also meant that trade unions are now in the position of having to consult their members about potential strike action. And this is not what we wanted to see, but they're really leaving the trade unions and health service and social care workers with no choice to stand up for themselves by doing this. And I also want to say that this goes against the position of this council, which was to call on the health minister not to do this, and to call on and to urge the executive not to follow the Tory insult to health workers by implementing and forcing through this 3% increase. So on behalf of, I can speak for people for profit, and I speak to health service workers. We're deeply disappointed that this is happening, and we urge people to speak up and send a message back to the executive that they deserve better, they should be treated better, and that if that means now voting yes for strike action, that's what people should do. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Hargan. Thank you. Members, I have no further speakers on matters arising, so I'm going to move on to item 7 and ask Barry, please, to take that.
Thanks, Chair. Members, the purpose of this is to update you in relation to funding for financial inclusion and to seek your approval for the allocation of an element of the funding received from the Department for Communities. Members, you'll be aware through previous reports and I'm aware of the previous financial inclusion programme, which was delivered through our 3 advice agencies in the district, and this was to provide additional hours of welfare advice to those most in need during the pandemic. An allocation of £80,085 was provided to the council for this programme during the 2021 financial year. The Department for Communities has now provided council with an additional £97,123 for financial inclusion for the remainder of this financial year. Members will be aware of the agreed approach in relation to delivery of any future financial inclusion funding as outlined at the Health and Community Special Council meeting in October 2021, and to deliver these through the 3 advice agencies following submission of delivery plans by all 3 providers. Officers in recent weeks have been consulting with the advice agencies in relation to delivery of this inclusion funding. All 3 agencies have expressed their frustration at the timescales outlined in relation to delivery of the funding. They've also expressed the need for more long-term funding for generalist advice services to create a more sustainable and effective service. Advisors who have worked long hours overtime during the pandemic are burnt out and unable to continue with a high level of hours provided during the past year or so, and it will be impossible to recruit additional expert staff for a short 3-month period. All 3 providers have requested members part of the fund to be utilised to cover the cost of Advice Pro, and others requested costs for additional triage, reception hours and some overheads. These costs have been deemed ineligible by the department. Costs submitted from the Resource Centre of £2,413 for additional hours for tribunal worker have been deemed eligible, and similar costs for Dove House for 2 additional advisors have been deemed eligible. Costs submitted by Advice Northwest for £10,000 in relation to the licence for Advice Pro again were deemed ineligible by the department. Officers have also consulted with the growth partnerships in relation to this inclusion project in order to identify projects and programmes in relation to delivery of the balance of £84,830 to be spent by March 2022. A proposal was made to provide a programme based on a similar approach delivered by Save the Children during the emergency, where families in poverty would participate in a programme of financial education budgeting, who would then be eligible for support for critical need up to a maximum of £200 for items such as child's cots, etc. This would be recommended through a financial resilience and individual report. However, the department deemed the support for equipment again as ineligible. Given the need, members, for this fund to be spent by March 22, it's unlikely at this stage that the balance of this allocation will be able to be delivered within the timescales outlined in the letter of offer. However, officers will continue to consult with the department and the growth partnerships and advice agencies in relation to any relaxation in the criteria or the timescales for delivery. So in terms, members, you've seen from the finances, the departments provide a letter of offer to council of 97,123 and spend by the end of March. So in terms of recommendations, members approve the following allocations from the Financial Inclusion Fund as outlined in 3.3 above to Dove House and the Resource Centre area. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you, Barry. And before coming on to Councillor Farrell, just take note, and people will have seen the declarations of interest. Councillor Tierney, board member of Resource Centre Derry, Alderman Devaney, interest Northwest Advice Board, and Councillor Harkin Sean, board member of Advice Northwest and Resource Centre, sorry. And a couple of speakers indicated. Councillor Farrell, Rory, please.
Thank you, Chair, and thanks, Barry, for the report. So here, the SLP welcomes the allocation from DFC of £97,000 for this financial inclusion fund, but we're frustrated, as are the council, and as are our three fantastic advice providers regarding the timescales that this money needs to be spent by the end of the financial year, and we only really got notification of it in November or December. So I think advance notification or advance allocation will be much more beneficial for us as a council and for our partners in the advice sector. So we have concerns about this. You know, DFC have given us nearly £100,000, but we can't spend it. We only can spend 12,000 of it at the minute. So I would ask Barry, are there any conversations ongoing with DFC to understand if this money can be rolled over into the next financial year? Because we need clarity, we need certainty, and we need confirmation if that's going to happen. So an update on that would be most welcome, but happy to propose the item. Thank you.
Thank you, Rory. A further declaration from Councillor Duffy, Advice Northwest, and I'll bring you in a minute, Sandra, but first, Councillor Harkin, Sean.
You, Chair. Yeah, and look, I'm glad to see that some of this money is being spent on things that our advice services are going to find useful to assist them. But it is very, very frustrating that right now we are unable to spend, £80,000, and it's very frustrating that some of the proposals that our advice service providers came forward with were rejected. And I think that, you know, to send money back to Stormont is, given the scale of our need here in Derry, and again, we know what our challenges are in terms of deprivation. We know how many people need help right now. We know how much pressure our advice service providers have been under to deliver help to people. It's very frustrating that we can't actually utilise this money. And I think that the problem is that it's not with the advice providers, because they are looking for core funding. They are coming up with proposals. The problem is with the way that this money is being distributed, and it's last minute, and it's it doesn't give people any way to plan. It doesn't give people the opportunity to put this where the advice providers actually want it to go. And as documented in the report, I mean, people are, advice provider, advice workers, like workers in many other sectors, are have been overwhelmed and reading that they're burnt out is worrying. So I think that I suppose the message from the council has to be that we need more advance notice. We need better mechanisms for the distribution of funding. And I think that I don't understand. I thought that there was going to be an opportunity to roll this money into next year. So what I'm hearing from you, from the council officer from Barry, is that that's not a possibility right now. I believe that happened last year, that funding, we were able to roll some of that into the following year. Can we write to the department, or to the minister, requesting that we're able to that this funding can be rolled into the next financial year? Well, I would like to propose that we formally write to the minister about this funding and request that. Thank you, Chair. And I'm happy to write that in quickly to the chat box.
Thank you. Come back to the proposal, Sean, if you read it in. Councillor Duffy, Sandra.
Yeah, thank you, Chair, and thank you, Barry, for the report. And I suppose just to share the previous speaker's frustrations around it, I do completely welcome the allocation of a further 97,000 from DFC. It's money that is really needed within this council area to address the issues. The three advice agencies that have been mentioned in the report, I understand their frustrations as well, and I have to say their advisors have been doing absolutely tremendous work, particularly over the last 18 months, but further back than that. I've been on the Board of Advice Northwest probably for over 10 years at this stage, so know the work that's involved and know how hard they have been working, and that they are at a burnout stage at this stage. So any assistance that can be provided, we should be looking at it. But probably a question similar to the previous speakers. I thought that we had come to some sort of understanding with DFC that we could nearly commit the spend prior to March and then roll the money on. Correct me if I'm wrong and completely misunderstood that. The other question I probably would have is, I'm sure we're not the only council area that is in this position. So have we looked at what other council areas are doing in relation to this funding? Because I'm sure DFC don't want us to be handing money back. They want it to be spent. So if the options that we're coming up with are being rejected, is there options that other council areas have suggested that could be used? And just for an example, could the money be used to address sort of the energy crisis? Could we be looking at vouchers for food or fuel? I don't know. It's just a suggestion and working through our growth partnerships. Because I certainly know that I don't want to be handing money back when we do have such need within the council area. Great to get the money in from DFC, but let's look at how we can get it spent. Thank you.
I'm conscious, folks, we haven't went back to Barry yet in terms of what Councillor Barrow, Rory has indicated, and Sean has put his proposal in. But if I can take one more speaker who's indicated, and then we can come back to working our way through it. Alderman Devaney Morris.
Thank you, Chair, for allowing me in. And while I welcome the report on the 97,000, I do have frustration that there's only 12,000 of that can be spent at the moment, and unlikely to be. The 85,000 that is left over is at the moment looking unlikely if we can get it spent. Look, I do agree with the rest of the speakers, and I do agree with Councillor Harkin's proposal that we write to the Minister to and look to see if this money can be spent in other areas. And look, yes, we need to ask the question about relaxation, and it's down to the criteria, Chair. This is down to the criteria. Like the rest of the speakers, and I declared an interest in Advice Northwest. and look, being on the board of that, and I hear the good work that all the advice agencies are carrying out, and especially has been carrying out this last year or year and a half through a very, very difficult time. And I was on an advice board meeting this morning, and in the last year, Chair, they have carried out over 30,000, I think about 30,400 people through their, well, not through their doors, but dealing with clients on very, very difficult issues. And these are the most vulnerable people in society. And look, I would like to see if some of the issues around that could be relaxed. But Chair, definitely disappointed that the money, the full totality, and I do agree that we should be looking at options to utilise the 85,000 and try and give, because the last thing I detest hearing in very, very difficult times here, that there is a possibility 85k could be sent back. And in relation to the proposal, Chair, I have no problem in seconding that proposal. Thanks, Chair.
Thanking you, Maurice. As I say, the proposals proposed and seconded, but if they come back, they Barry, and then we'll put the proposal to the floor. Barry, please.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. I'll try and answer the Rory, Sandra, and Maurice's questions all together. So I suppose, members, we have been engaging with the departmental officials in recent weeks about spend and also commitment. Can we commit the monies and then roll over spend and get it carried over into the new financial year? They haven't said no for definite, but we still have not got confirmation from the departmental officials on that. So obviously we have explained to those officials, as we have repeatedly over the last year and a half, about our governance arrangements and approvals in through council and all of the rest. So it's not a definite no, but we haven't been confirmed. It hasn't been confirmed officially yet that we can commit spend and then roll it over into the new year. And there's still quite a bit of work to be done with local growth partnerships, with local community groups around that, in terms of actually going and getting an action plan drawn up, and also then that officials determine it eligible spend. So back to your point, Sandra, is fuel vouchers, is any vouchers of any type, would that be approved by departmental officials? And we honestly don't know the answer to that. So there's quite a bit of work to do, and then a double check with departmental officials. Is it eligible spend? So it is quite frustrating for us, and we will be going back, and we are engaging with all the other 10 councils who have the very, very same queries as we do in terms of this very, very unrealistic timescale. And if you recall, members, going back some months ago, Karen and myself both had said that our community development team were particularly stretched and basically spending most of their time around COVID support and the COVID support funding, and it's having an impact on their delivery, within doing the actual community development jobs that they normally do. So this further adds to that in terms of trying to get action plans, getting approval of spend and tight timescales. So look, we are going to work over the next 2 to 3 weeks and work with officials to see, can we get this progressed, and at least a commitment from them that spend could be carried over. So we will keep members updated on that. We will be engaging with the growth partnerships on that and just going out to plan what could be done. But again, it's determined by the officials whether they deem certain types of expenditure eligible or not. So we will keep members informed around that through the growth partnerships.
Thanking you, Barry, for the responses and obviously for the work involved. To say, we have a proposal proposed and seconded, and I'm also going to ask Councillor Farrell, Rory, who is regards to an amendment.
Thanks, Chair, and thanks, Barry, for the report. So, a number of councillors that are on here were at the advice panel earlier this week, and this was discussed. And the update that the councillors got was that discussions were ongoing. There was no certainty regarding whether this money could be handed over or carried over into the next financial year, and that's what we need. So I support Councillor Harkin's proposal that we write to the DFC Minister asking that this money is rolled over into the next financial year, so we don't lose this 85 grand. But I've got a further amendment which I think strengthens the proposal, because we're in this position because we don't get the allocations early enough in the financial year. So it's nearly Christmas, and we're being told, right, you have 100 grand to spend by March. So here, my amendment, which should be appearing in the chat box now, is that, and calls on the Minister to ensure that any future funding allocations are communicated to councils in the first quarter of the financial year. Because if they can do that, it'll give us certainty, it'll give our advice providers certainty, and it's just the right thing to do. This is lastminute.com. It's nearly Christmas, and they're saying, you've got this money, spend it by March. That's not realistic at all. So I think this amendment will put a bit of pressure on the DFC Minister to get the money out to councils and providers early in the year. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Farrell. And the amendments proposed by Councillor Farrell and seconded by Councillor Tierney. Brian, on the amendment, Alderman Devaney Morris.
Thank you, Chair, and just for ourselves, DEP here, we have no problem in supporting that amendment. I think it's right. Councillor Farrell says it puts a belt and braces in and strengthens it. And look, it's a very vital point that Councillor Farrell has raised here. Too many times we see funding coming to the council, and it's lastminute.com trying to get it spent. And look, you're working on ad hoc. And many of the providers out there, through different fund strands, would feel that it comes too late. And what happens when it comes too late, Chair? There's panic then in getting a programme put together. And sometimes you could question then, is the programme the best that can be delivered? If this money was delivered earlier, it gives everyone time to plan and plan very, very good for the future. And investigate programs and see what is the best. And look, no problem, Chair, in supporting the amendment.
Thanking you, Morris. Councillor Harkin, Sean.
Thanks, Chair. Yeah, look, I agree with Councillor Farrell. I think that this does strengthen the proposal, so I 100% support it. And I think that we should be sending a strong message to the department that this is creating chaos for our advice providers, not knowing how much money they're going to have available, and then funding being offered for things that are not part of their core planning, that are not central to the key things that they need to do to assist people here. But there is the bigger issue of, and I think we'll have to come back to this. There's been a real terms reduction in funding for advice providers since 2015, and we're now seeing rocketing energy prices. So look, we need the department not just to clarify how much they're going to be delivering, but we also need a big increase in terms of funding for our advice sector, because the council should not be put in the position of being using its rates to subsidise what the department is refusing to fund, and we know that that money is well spent, because we know what the challenges are across the district for people who need assistance and need advice, need help with benefits, and so on. So there's a larger issue here of funding's been the same from the department since 2015, and that's putting massive pressures on our advice providers. It puts pressures on the delivery of the service, but it also puts pressures in terms of pay and conditions for workers as well. So that I think is, I think that we're going in the right direction here, but I think that will be the next step for us as well. We have to put in a strong demand for more funding in recognition of the important work that the advice providers carry out. Thank you, Chair.
Members, moving to the amendment, which is proposed and seconded. I haven't heard anybody obviously speak against the amendment, and if I don't, take the amendment as read and as agreed, and then Thank you, Councillor Duffy. Moving on to the substantive motion, and again, I haven't heard any speak against it, but don't think that is proposed, seconded, and unanimous. Okay, thanking you, members. If I could move on to item 8, and Barry again, please. Pilots Row.
Chair,
Thanks, Chair.
Chair, just before we move on, I wanted to raise a separate issue on this.
Sorry.
Well, I think that this is the appropriate item 7 is the appropriate section. So I just want to get this on record that I've spoke to some advice providers, and they've says that Capita have resumed face-to-face meetings, and that people here are getting letters. People living in Derry are being sent letters by Capita for face-to-face meetings on Dungannon, and I think we could probably all agree straight away that that doesn't make any sense. So I think that we should. I mean, I don't understand why Capita is asking people to go from Derry to Dungannon for meetings, given that if there is going to be meetings with Capita, they would probably be done here. And it's also the case that given this where we are with the COVID and the pandemic, I thought much of this had been moved online if it was happening at all. So I'm raising a concern here, and I suppose the course of action for us, if it's appropriate, would be if we could write to the Capita for clarification, and also to the department for clarification as well.
Okay, Sean, thanks for that. Folks, are people in agreement with them two actions? Nobody in disagreement? Okay, officers cannot be solicited. Karen?
Yes, Chair, we'll take that on board.
Thank you. Okay, folks, moving on to item 8. Okay, as I say, Barry, please.
Thanks, Chair. Members, the purpose of this report is to give you an update on Pilots Row Youth and Community Centre, and to seek your approval to proceed with the following approach. 1, investigate the viability of a physically sealed off youth wing, which would reduce the current child protection concerns highlighted in a 2019 Education Training Inspectorate report, and have further consultation with the EA and community leaders, elected members, regarding the remaining elements of the building forming part of a council-owned community managed arrangement that would focus on expanding the community development activities and services of the building going forward, members. In terms of the background around this, most members will be aware that Pilots Row management model is unique within the council area, given that it is managed by the Education Authority with council. It first opened its doors in the mid-1970s, and it was developed through funding provided by the Derry City Council and North West Library Board. The centre is actually owned members jointly by Derry City and Strabane Council and the Education Authority. The youth provision and programming undertaken at Pilots Row is coordinated and managed by the EA. And prior to COVID-19, youth provision was delivered 6 days a week within Pilots Row. In terms of the range of other provision outside of youth provision, members, there's a range of activities: sports, exercise classes, dance classes, snooker club, sewing, knitting club, cooking, computer classes, camera club, and hairdressing. A cafe is also available within Pilots Row, open between 12 noon, serving mid-morning as well, and up to 2 p.m. The majority of the customer base members is individuals over 65 years plus from the areas adjacent to the centre. Eden Arts Centre also operates from within a dedicated space within Pilots Row. In terms of the resources, Pilots Row is currently jointly resourced by the Education Authority and Council. From an operational perspective, the centre is managed by the Education Authority, who employ all staff and manage the day-to-day activities of the centre. Council provide an annual contribution towards the operation of the centre. There's a need to review the current arrangements, as highlighted earlier, from the perspective of the responsibilities of the Education Authority for youth provision and for council in relation to the provision of community facilities. Discussions to date with the EEA include an option to operate the centre more effectively and efficiently as a standalone youth and community facility. The youth wing could be physically sealed off from the rest of the building, which would reduce the current child protection concerns highlighted in the 2019 report. And there is an option for the rest of the building to be operated under a council-owned community managed model. Council, as you're aware, members already have a successful track record of managing the rest of our centres on this basis. So in terms of financial or legal or HR or other areas, the Education Authority members currently employ all staff at the centre, and discussions are ongoing between two legal departments around that. There'd be further exploration required in relation to any capital costs in relation to the reconfiguration of the building to facilitate the separation of youth and community. And it's anticipated that the change to a council-owned community managed model would provide possible cost savings to the council in the long term. However, further investigation and consultation is required to investigate detailed costings going forward. So in terms of the recommendations, members, that you note the contents of the report and approve officers to take the following approach. To 1, investigate the viability of a physically sealed off youth wing, which would reduce the current child protection concerns highlighted in the 2019 report, and to have further consultation with the EEA, community leaders, elected reps regarding the remaining elements of the building forming part of a council-owned community managed arrangement. And this would focus on expanding the community development activities and services of the building going forward. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you, Barry. And the first speaker indicated, Councillor Tierney. Brian.
Chair, thank you, and thanks to Barry for the report. Last month, we spoke about another building in this council area, and people were declaring whether they did or didn't have a sentimental interest in that particular building, and I will declare that I do have a sentimental interest to Pilot Row. I spent most of my childhood and my teenage years in Pilot Row, and I want to very clearly ensure that the position of this committee and this council is that we do all we can to ensure that Pilot Row remains open and remains a key element within that Bogside community, because it has served that community for decades over very, very many difficult times. I can fully understand that anyone who has spent any time in and around Pilot Row, I can understand the child protection issues. It has corridors and nooks and crannies everywhere in it. So in relation to the sealed off youth wing, I can fully support that and have no issue with it. The biggest thing for me since we've received this report has been engaging with staff and users of Pilot Row. Chair, the staff in Pilot Row are very unaware of what is happening at the minute, and I note that the report in 3.4, I think it is, states that the staff are employed by the EA. I would encourage officers in any further discussions that you're having around the future of Pilot Row, that you encourage EA to talk directly to the staff of the centre, because they actually don't know what's going on. This, as officers will be aware, has been rambling about for quite some time, and there has been all sorts of rumours and promises and broken promises, and the staff really don't know what's going on. So I would encourage officers to do that with EA at the next opportunity. And my fear is that coming out of the back of today's paper, staff are going to find out, or potentially find out, what may or may not be happening with the centre, either on social media or in the pages of one of our local newspapers, which isn't the way I think that this should be done. So further consultation with staff, in my opinion, is a must. In relation to the community or the council-owned community managed model, there is a number of community centres across our district that are run out this way. And, you know, I think back to the former Shantallow Community Centre, when it was council-owned, council-managed, and look at it now as council-owned, community-managed, and you can see the benefits of why we would want to go down the road of community managed, because people from that community with a vested interest in providing courses and opportunities for that community are there, and they're trying to drill it out, and they're really the backbone and the driving force behind that centre. But I would like to see, and I have no issue in proposing the recommendations, but I would like to see further discussion on this paper going into the community centres working group, where we can find out the plans, we can drill down into any potential new management structure within Pilot Row, and we can ensure that we're making sure that we are protecting the existing services that are in there. The canteen, the snooker club, the old men's shed, the youth wing, the dressmaker, and everyone who currently uses Pilot Row, because they've been using it for quite some time, and they're part of the fabric within that. So whilst I welcome the development, I think it's important that we keep at the forefront of this committee the commitment to doing all we can to ensure that Pilot Row continues to serve the people of the Bogside as it has done over this last 40 or 50 years, and ensuring that we can do that. I think the best way to do that is to have further discussions with the EA, but also running that through the community centres working group that we already have established within this council, which is, if I recall correctly, was established to deal with issues like this, and that's where I would like to see this coming through. That way we can have a more in-depth conversation about the future of this centre. But as I say, the future of this centre should be, for this committee, is that it remains open and that the staff are updated as soon as possible on the future plans for the centre. Thank you.
Thanking you, Brian, and I acknowledge that you're proposing the recommendations, and obviously you've articulated a number of points there. I have 3 other speakers so far indicated in relation to this. Councillor McGinley, Emma.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Barry, for the report. Completely concur with everything that Councillor Tierney had raised there in terms of Pilot Row, and I've been speaking with my party colleague Patricia Logue, who's been involved in this process a lot longer than I've been on council, and she had raised the similar concerns in and around the staff being engaged with and their terms of contracts, as it says in the 4.2. that EA does currently employ all staff, and discussions are ongoing with legal in that regard. There was a bit of a concern there raised that they don't know going forward who's going to be responsible for their contracts or where their jobs are at. So I think that the consultation with the staff in that regard needs to be urgent as opposed to anything else. And then in terms of the recommendation, we'd be happy to second them. But within the consultation with the EA and community leaders, that should also include the user groups and staff as well, in our opinion. But just those wee points on that for Megan.
Thanking you, Councillor McGinley. Councillor Harkin, Sean.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, look, I think we all fully appreciate the child protection issues at Pilot's Row, and that that there needs to be a plan to figure that out in order for the centre to extend its services and be compliant with legislation as well. So that is welcome. I think that I'm a bit alarmed that we're hearing that workers at the centre are not being properly engaged with. That is, I mean, given that this is a community centre at the heart of a very in our community, you know, the community of workers there should certainly be involved in these discussions and have a say on it. And then I think on the issue of if all the workers are education authority workers now, they would fall under the terms, conditions, pay rates that exist in the education authority. They've got trade union rights. I know that. They've been out there campaigning for universal free meals for all children in school. But if they're transferred over in the community operated or community managed centre and no longer the employees or workers for EA, I would be concerned about the impact that would have in their terms and conditions, and for 2 reasons. One, it's just a fact that terms and conditions across the community sector tend to be weaker, and pay does as well. And it's also the case that for the most part, the community sector is unorganised in terms of there's not a lot of trade union representation. So while I really, really agree with and appreciate what people have said about, communities should be able to drive forward services in their area, and people have a real sense of like knowing what people need and what can bring communities together and what can give people access to whatever services that can be fulfilling. The issue of terms and conditions, I think, are very, very important. Given you look across right now, people demanding improved terms and conditions, so we wouldn't want to have a situation where people were put in the insecure work situations with worse pay, worse terms and conditions, and no trade union rights. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Sean. Two further indicated speakers, Councillor Donnelly, Gary.
Thanks, Chair. I'm not a member of the committee, but I appreciate you letting me in. Chair, look, anything that makes any environment a safer place for children has to be welcome. But I just want to share some of the sentiments of Councillor Tierney and Councillor Harkin and Councillor McGinley. I have been speaking to some members of the staff, and I can confirm they are at a loss of what's happening, and there's definitely, at the very least, a lack of communication. So, anything that can be done to clarify that and the workers in there would be welcomed. But the other thing I would like some clarification on, there doesn't seem to have been a management meeting in an awful long time. Has there been a decision taken to stop these meetings, or if we could have some clarification on that? Thank you.
Thank you, Gary. I have one more speaker, and then I'll come back to the officers. Answer that query, Gary. Alderman Kerrigan, Keith.
Thank you very much, Chair. Just a basic point there, having read through that report, I'm just wondering, have we any inclination on costings? Or I know it says that costings later, but have we even a ballpark figure there of what the initial costings were? I know it states that there are likely to be savings in the long term, but just to get a rough inclination as to, or I know that will come back for a decision at a later date, I'm assuming, but just wondering if we any inclination on a costing what this will be. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Alderman Kerrigan. If we could go back to officers, and obviously there's a number of queries within the contributions. Officers.
Thanks, Chair. I'll answer in reverse, Alderman Kerrigan. In terms of the costings, that's to follow through with the report of 2019 recommendations around child protection. So it's anticipated those costs would be covered by the Education Authority. It's their report that those works would need to be done by them in terms of how they have to comply with. In response to Councillor Donnelly's question, I'm not sure, Gary. There's a pilot. There's a couple of committees from Pilot Row 1 that the Education Authority would have pulled, and then there's another one I believe that councillors would have been involved in. Generally, it's an EA joint committee with council officers. I'm not sure which one you refer to, Gary, but if it's the EA one, I am aware that a member staff from the EA has moved on, and look, we will around all of this correspond with them and ask them can they pull one of those together, as well as Councillor Tierney's recommendation about having a meeting of our community centre grouping around that in terms of having a bit of more detailed discussion around all of these proposals.
Thank you, Barry. There's a couple of queries coming in there just on the back of that. Councillor Donnelly, Gary.
It's the management meetings that councillors are members of.
Through yourself, Chair. Perfect. Gary, I'll check all of that out, and we'll get all of those organised for early in the new year. Whatever ones. There's also the joint committee meeting as well that'll need to be organised, so we'll get all of those in place.
Okay, thanks, Brian.
Okay, Councillor Tierney, Brian.
Chair, thanks. And I suppose first of all, to concur with Councillor Donnelly in relation to the management committee, the one that we nominate to. If it makes it easier for you, Barry, the one that we nominate to at full council or at the AGM, I'm on it, and it hasn't met from at least June of this year. and with such big plans for the centre going through, you would have imagined that they would have wanted to inform, at the very least, the management committee of that. But in relation to the recommendation, Chair, and I know Barry did say we would have a meeting of the community centre working group. I wasn't talking about just a meeting. There's going to be a lot of fine points and a lot of fine detail to go through as we take Pilot Row through this process. I would like to see a number of meetings and step through this process stage by stage, but having an ongoing process with the community centre working group so that we can go delve down under the finer detail and ensure that we're doing all we can to protect the future of Pilot Row. So it's not just one meeting, it's ongoing meetings as we step through this process. Thank you.
Thank you, Brian. Barry, and them two final points, is that okay?
No, Chair, for yourself, that's fine. What I would suggest is we get a meeting together early in the new year, and then we map out over the course of the remainder of the year, and possibly bring different people in. If we can get the Education Authority in, there was a consultant's report that was done a couple of years ago as well around management models and costs and all that. So look, we'll sequence those meetings, and we'll double up as well with the management committee that Councillor Donnelly refers to as well. We'll present the same information, and we'll try and get as many of those scheduled in the early part of the new year. I would suggest members possibly monthly at the outset, just so we can give members full information around all of this.
Thanking you, Barry, and thanking you, members, on that important item. Moving on to item 9, and again, Barry, yourself, please.
Thanks, Chair. Members, the purpose of this report is for your approval on the use and prioritisation of any budgets identified for reinvestment of the Council's playing pitches and pavilions. Members, you'll previously remember the approvals that we had through various committees and Council. And in January this year, members approved a list of preferred options that would deliver on our Council playing pitch strategy. Officers, after those works have been initiated, have carried out additional scoping around additional investment at our playing pitches, at our muggas and our pavilions, and it's all around increasing the standards linked to the strategy. Members, we have come up with indicative costs totaling 351,000, and you'll see them all in Appendix 1. They've been identified for these additional works, and they all will deliver on the strategic recommendations of our playing pitch strategy. Just one wee word of caution around it, members. All costs are indicative based on recent procurement exercises, and construction and material costs at present are experiencing significant change, so these costs could rise. Exact costings will only be available once procurement has been completed for each of the individual projects. To ensure a state of readiness, approval is sought to complete additional works should any budget be identified, and we have been in discussion with the lead finance officer about possible underspends in this year's leisure and sport budget. Works would be prioritised based on the highest score from the priority assessment matrix that you'll see in Appendix 2. So I've highlighted already, members, that works will be carried out subject to budget being made available. In terms of the recommendation, before we come to that, members, you'll see in Appendix 1, so there's a range of works: Dunnamana, Glebe, Mitchell Park, Newton Stewart, Oakland Park. There's 3 recommendations there around intermediate standard categorisation from the IFA. There's Patrician Villas Mugga, Claudy and Spamount, and then you'll see at the very bottom, members, small scale auxiliary works under 30,000 threshold, and those relate, just for information, to items such as if you need to purchase new goals, carry out verti draining at pitches, or do some essential drainage works, or do some small painting or refurb work at pavilions, and they arise normally out of quarterly reports and health and safety audits that we carry out. So we've included that at the end for a bit of scope to upgrade those pitches and pavilions, members. So in terms of the recommendations, that members approve the proposed reinvestment programme and delegate authority to carry out the work should the budget become available this year. We will have discussions with the lead finance officer, and obviously it will need to be carried into next year should any underspends be identified. Thanks, Chair.
Thanking you, Barry, for that there. Alderman Devaney Morris.
Thank you, Chair, for allowing me in, and I welcome the presentation, the recommendation coming forward here. And I think it's vitally important that we have, if funding becomes available, it can be spent on the issues in the box that Barry has indicated here. I think it's important that we have our pitches and our pavilions kept up to a good standard, and I have no problem, Chair, in proposing the proposal here that the reinvestment programme or the delegated authority, should budgets become available. I think it's vitally important, Chair, that we're ready, and the delegated authority, if money becomes available and can be spent fairly quickly, because like some of the other issues, when we do get funding, we have sometimes a short time to get the money spent. So this would fit well if we could get funding for this, Chair. Thanks, Chair. How would you propose?
Thanking you, Morris, and thanks for the proposal. Councillor Farrell, Rory.
Yeah. Thanks, Chair, and thanks, Barry, for the report. So obviously this is good news, and it's positive news that we're planning to invest heavily in sports facilities right across the city and district. You know, we've got Craig and Claudy, Castlederg, all the C's. But I have two questions. So it's 350 grand if budget becomes available. So do we actually expect budget to become available before year end? And the second question is around delegated authority. If budget does become available, does that mean that if money becomes available, that the works will just proceed on the priority basis? Or will we as councillors be informed of council's intention to start the work? Thank you.
I have a number of other speakers, Barry, but just in terms of them two queries, it might be helpful if they're to be addressed.
Yeah, Chair, happy to answer those now. Yeah, look, we through yourself, Chair, Councillor Farrell, we have been working with the Director of Accounting, and members will be aware that the loss of income throughout leisure, DFC are covering that up to the end of this financial year. So as a result of that, there will very well be identified savings of that nature, or if not the full amount, close to it. So that is something that we've identified now. If we get a commitment from council, it's something that we can carry into the new financial year, because obviously there's quite substantial works that need carried out at various sites here. And so that, I hope that answers that question. In terms of the delegated authority and prioritisation, anything that would delve from that table, members, that we wouldn't carry out, we would obviously have a priority matrix, but look, we've indicated all of those simply because we feel they're all necessary to carry out. So if we did deviate from any of those, we would be bringing information papers into members to highlight why we haven't done specific works. But those are ones that certainly, if the budget becomes available, we would like to see all of those being carried out over the next period of time. Thanks, Chair.
Thanking you, Barry. Councillor Tierney, Brian.
Chair, thank you, and thanks to Barry for the report. And I don't know if it's been proposed, but if it has, I'm happy to second it. In relation to some of the schemes that have been listed here, and I'm thinking back to our meeting of the regional substadia for soccer fund, which I don't suspect is going to open anytime soon. But, you know, I'm particularly looking at the stuff up around Oakland Park, and I'm sure there's other areas across the district which would fall into that scheme if it were to open. Is this an attempt for us to try and do the work that we were expecting that scheme to do? And if it is, why are we doing it? Do we have any indication of any word from the department that scheme's not going to open? Because it just seems a bit strange to me that just less than a week ago we were on with the department lobbying for that scheme to open, and now we're coming with a paper to try and cover some of the potential applications that this council may have been putting in.
Thanking you, Brian. Alderman will obviously come back to Barry, but Alderman Hussey, Derek.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Barry. I would echo some of the concerns that Councillor Farrell had there. We don't want to I suppose, raise expectations and then find that, come the finances, sorry guys, we're not able to do this. But I welcome Barry's response to that. I note the spread of funding from, small amounts around the 5,000 right up to 45, 60. But those that themselves are smaller schemes as well, and that is to be welcomed, that this is a spread of benefit throughout the district council. Can I say a special thank you to Barry for a quick response on one of those? He knows the one, the Mitchell Park one, was of concern between the two pitches there. It's extremely welcome. As you have Mitchell Park, Newton Stewart, Spamont, again, another extremely welcome proposal. People that use the pitches at Spamont have been crying out for additional parking there to alleviate parking which actually parks on the pavement alongside the pitches down at Spamont. So that there is tremendously welcome, and I trust that we will see these coming to fruition as we move forward before the end of the financial year. And I trust that the procurement is on the verge of being undertaken. I realise that this report has to go to full council, but I would hope that as soon as officers can get on the ball on this, that they begin the work on it. And congratulations on bringing this list together. Thanks.
Thank you, Derek. Councillor McGinley, Emma, please.
Good Chair, and thank you as well to Barry for the report. I think it is to be welcomed that we're looking at investment and the pitches and pavilions, and as other speakers have referred to, that it's right across the district. I'm delighted to see that Oakland Park is included within that list. As a party, we've recently met with some of the teams and the groups that would use that facility, and they're looking for this sort of investment. So if it was to go ahead, I'm glad to see that it's going to be ready to go as soon as money becomes available, rather than it being a procurement exercise and there being any delays in it. So basically just wanted to welcome it from the Sinn Féin perspective, and hopefully we'll see it going forward in a positive way. Thank you.
Thank you, Emma. Councillor Tierney, quick point.
Brian? Yeah, Chair, thank you for allowing me in to raise this quick point. And I do note that, and I will note that it was Alderman Hussey that brought me attention to it. And Spamont, they're looking for additional car parking, and I have no doubt that it's needed. But Barry will be aware of an issue at Leafair playing pitches, where the cars are parking and blocking Leafair Gardens and Leafair Park. There is plans there for additional car parking, which they say they've moved at a snail's pace, is not an exaggeration. But I'm wondering, no, that's two council pitches, the 3G and then the grass pitch at Leafair, which is causing unbelievable distress to local residents. And there's plans there in place. And I'm wondering why that scheme wasn't included in this potential round of funding, if it becomes available, obviously. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Tierney. Thank you, Brian. Barry, back to yourself. And I think there's at least two queries there from Brian about there and about the funding in terms of list of projects and in terms of the sub-regional.
Yeah, I'll answer in reverse if that's okay, Brian. And Chair, with regards to Leafair, there was correspondence as of this week. We've been engaging with our capital development section. The officer that was allocated to that has moved on, and they're looking at another resource to get this scoped out. So in terms of, I've asked for ballpark figures, Brian, around the cost for the Leafair parking, and it would probably consume the majority of this budget, or a good part of it anyway. There are land transfer issues, and there are also planning issues with that. So it wouldn't be a project that would be anywhere near shovel ready. Look, and understand the frustration from the group out there in terms of that. But that Leafair project, in my view, and I think it's shared by others, would have to go to capital working group because of the extent of it. So the next steps are now to get a resource allocated and get it as shovel ready as possible, and to then go into capital working group as a health and safety ask. So we're on that. I think there's a meeting being organised. We're trying to facilitate one before Christmas with the group and councillors. I think an invite went out today from Hazel, so we'll further update you at that meeting. With regards to the general spend here on the list, most of them address the strategy recommendations or indeed essential health and safety. If you look at the Mugga over Patrician Villas as an example, with regards to Oakland, a key part of our strategy is having as many facilities meeting the IFS standard as Karen had highlighted at the members briefing. So we have Melvin in Strabane, we have the Brandywell, and any new proposals for Templemore will look at IFA championship standard on the outdoor provision. So with regards to here, we have some pressures from clubs playing, particularly in Derry at the Brandywell. Include Institute, includes Derry City, includes Maiden City, and indeed their under 17 and 19 teams and the female team. So the idea behind this, Brian, yes, some of the expenditure I assume would be eligible for a stadium program, but in the absence of there being a program or any criteria, this is a huge demand for us in terms of having another IFA compliant stadium at least intermediate standard. You'll see the spend around the stand and the new entrance point and spectator fencing. Those would meet those criteria. The first one, the ball catch along the housing, isn't a particular ask, but it's to assist residents who have complained and address that particular issue. So in the absence of criteria for any new stadium program, I'm not quite sure how to answer it, but I imagine that spend would be eligible. But we do have quite a bit of pressure from a number of teams, male and female, under 17, 19 and senior at the minute. And local elected reps have been engaging with the local clubs up there, particularly Trojans, and this has been an ask of them over recent years. So we have been working closely with them, and the team have been working closely with them within sports development. So that's why we have it down as if we can identify funding, it's something that we should do as a council. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you, Barry. Councillor McHugh, Rory.
Paul, I just want to go back to the Spamount Pavilion, and I want to just add my voice to welcoming the proposed works regarding the extra parking. I first raised this back it was actually E&R committee who agreed then, officers agreed to liaise with H&C at that time, so I'm glad to see that that's included, and I know that in particular residents will be particularly welcoming it, given as Councillor Hussey outlined there, the parking on the pavements, which was raised back in the E&R committee by myself. But I know too that the local church there, St Francis of Assisi, would also welcome it, because I mean there was parking there on their property, which was leading to the greenery to the front of the church being damaged as well. So just to put on record the fact that I welcome that as well. Thank you.
Thanking you, Rory, and obviously the recommendation has been proposed and seconded. So thanks to Barry for that. And moving on, members to item 10, and asking Seamus to take this, please. Review of street trading policies.
Thanks, Chair. Members, Council adopted a street trading policy in January 2020. You'll be aware Council only grant a stationary street trading licence if the proposed location is within the designated streets. The current list of streets designated are outlined in Appendix 2, and it's felt that this list needs to be amended. Although the policy is not due to be renewed until 2023, it does allow for an earlier review to be undertaken if sections are no longer valid or improvements are required. And Chair, we're seeking members' approval of the procedure for determining street trading licence applications to amend the policy so that charges only become payable when the licence is being issued, and approval to engage consultancy services to carry out a review of designated streets.
Thank you, Seamus. Recommendations there.
So proposed, Chair Alderman Devaney.
Alderman Devaney, thank you. Seconder, folks.
Chair, I've indicated in the chat box.
Sorry, Rory, I'm just seeing it there now. Sorry, Councillor Farrell.
All right, cheers, Chair. And thanks, Seamus, for the report. So obviously, the current list of designated streets was adopted in 2002. So I think it's probably beyond time that was updated. But I've got a question. It's saying on the paper that we're going to engage a consultancy firm, and it says that the cost for that will be met from within existing budgets. Can we get a flavour of how much that's going to cost us? And why can this not be done in-house? Thank you.
Thank you, Rory.
Through you, Chair, yeah. I suppose the background to this is that it's anticipated that it'll cost in the region probably under 10,000 to carry out the review. That currently a lot of the staff are, again, similar to what Barry referred to earlier on, are involved in COVID-related activities, both in terms of advisory and enforcement for the regulations, and that was the reason why we've recommended that we engage with a consultant.
Okay, Seamus. Councillor Farrell. Okay, thank you. Folks have a proposer and Alderman Devaney. Councillor Farrell, happy to second. Thank you, Roy. Unless anybody has any opposition, next minute. Minute's a long time in politics, isn't it? Okay, members, thank you. Moving on to item 11, and asking Karen to take this. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Members, the report is to provide you with details of 6 monthly progress, April to September 2021, in terms of our delivery against our performance improvement objective and the service delivery plan for the Health and Community Directorate for the year 21-22. It's been some time since May 2016, but that is when the reporting framework was agreed by Council in terms of our commitment to addressing the improvement performance objective that is a requirement of the department. Obviously, our higher level strategic document is the Strategic Inclusive Growth Plan, and you'll see that health-related activities, sports and physical activities are reflected within that framework. From a council perspective, the detail that we have provided is included at Appendix 1. However, asking you to note that just in terms of the environmental health update, the preparation of the documents, there should be an additional number of areas covered around environment and neighbourhood, food safety, public health, and registration, health and safety and consumer protection, and licensing and safety advisory activities. Those were distended from the documents that were sent, so we will circulate that to you for your information following this meeting. So members, in summary, we're asking you to note the contents of the report and endorse progress as set out at the appendice.
Thank you, Karen, and just a note, declaration of interest from Maurice Devaney, PCSP, and I would make the same declaration of interest myself, and I'll put it in the chat box here. I have no indicated speakers as yet, folks.
Chair, I would propose that we accept the recommendation and note.
Okay. Anybody the second, or anybody want to speak to it?
Happy to second, Chair. And likewise, declaration of interest in terms of PCSP.
Yes. Okay, Sandra. Alderman Kerrigan, declaration of interest, a member of PCSP. Thank you, Keith. Folks, members, I have poser and seconder for the recommendation. People are okay with that there. I don't see any indicated speakers. I'll move on to item 12 and ask Barry again, please.
Thanks, Chair. Members, the purpose of this report is to provide you with an update on the request that this council undertakes an investigation into the sectarian singing and comments emanating from the Castledown Young Loyalists organised concert on the 9th of July in Albert Street, Castledown, and brings back a report on that council contacts Castledown Young Loyalists to have loyalist flags and bunting removed. So members, the second recommendation is to seek your approval that current grant aid payments to Castledurg Young Loyalists are released in line with the terms and conditions of council grant aid programmes, and to seek members' approval that warning letters issued to the group informing them that an action plan, communications plan, and specific risk assessment were required prior to the issue of any future letters of offer to deal with actions to be taken in the event of this type of incident again, and to advise that any reoccurrence may result in funding being withheld. Members, you'll be aware that the group were awarded Good Relations grant aid of 4,000 and Alternative to Bonfires £1,000 funding to hold this event in July 2021. The event has been taking place in the car park each year since 2018 with funding from the Good Relations and the Good Relations Engagement Project. Castledurg Young Loyalists, who were the organisers, complied with all requirements, including permission for use of the car park, liaising with community services and SAG where necessary in advance of the event. The organisers confirmed to council officers that an individual thought to be under the influence of alcohol sang up to 3 songs in the night, some of which were included a number of derogatory expletives on 2 separate occasions an hour apart. On the first occasion, a representative of the organisers requested that the band pull the sound, and this was done during the second song, and the individual allegedly proceeded to verbally abuse the organiser for the action taken. Approximately an hour later, the same individual took to the stage again and sang another song before being removed by the performer, who is understood to be the son of the individual in question. It is also understood that there were no wider participation by the crowd that were present. It is the view of senior council officers who have looked into what was deemed an apology by the event organisers in the Durgan newspaper was in fact a statement of what happened rather than an apology. In respect of the issue of an apology, as outlined in the previous report to members, the organisers have since agreed that what was published in the Durgan was more of a statement than an apology. However, the organiser stated prior to being contacted by the council, he had contacted a Good Relations officer to offer his apologies, as he acknowledged that it was a council-funded event, but maintaining that events were out of their control. One of the event organisers also confirmed that a representative of the group apologised directly to some local nationalist politicians, asking them to extend the apology to their local constituents. The organisers have clarified that the bunting and flags present on the lampposts around the car park had been erected prior to the event by individuals unknown. This was to mark the centenary of Northern Ireland in the month of April and wasn't connected to the Castledurg Fusion event in July. Officers have also contacted the PSNI to clarify if any formal complaints have been made to them in respect of the incident and the event, and they have confirmed that no complaints have been received. Council's HR department advised it would not be the role of officers within Council to carry out further public investigation other than to ensure that the organisation had complied with the terms and conditions of the letter of offer. Any public investigation on the incident would be a matter for the PSNI. Council's legal section have also advised that there are no grounds within the terms and conditions of the grant aid to withhold the funding at present, given the information provided by the group, the terms contained within the offer, and the fact that there have been no complaints received by the PSNI. It is, however, important that this type of incident is not repeated. It's proposed, therefore, the Council issue a warning letter to Castledurg Young Loyalists and require them to provide an action plan and risk assessment in the event of receiving any future funding. The action plan will need to deal specifically with the risk of this type of incident, and the group will be advised that any reoccurrence where future applications are successful would result in funding being withheld for that particular element. A communications plan will also be required where any future funding is received, which will be required to outline how any sectarian incident will be dealt with in future. So in terms of the finance or other implications, there's none at present, members. So in terms of the recommendations, that the current grant aid payment to Castledurg Young Loyalists are released in line with the terms and conditions of the Council grant aid programmes, and that a warning letter is issued to Castledurg Young Loyalists informing them that an action plan, communications plan and specific risk assessment will be required prior to the issue of any future letters of offer to deal with actions to be undertaken in this type of incident, and to advise that any reoccurrence will result in funding being withheld for that element of the programme. Thank you, Chair.
Thanking you, Barry. And just before coming on to this item, just they record, as it's in the chat box there, that Alderman Darren Guy has joined the meeting. Very welcome, Darren. With regard to item 12, Could I ask Alderman Kerrigan, Keith, please?
Thank you very much, Chair. Just seeking some clarification, Chair, and in regards to this here. And I understand the incident has been looked at again, and this is the recommendation now from council officers. I'm just asking the question in regards to the action plan, communication plans, and the specific risk assessment that will now have to be put in place, that there will be relevant support given, and if it is passed, from council officers, because I'm assuming then this is effectively an additional hurdle to funding that we're putting in place for this specific group. Is that what I'm is that what I'm picking up from this? This is not something that other groups have to put in, will have to fill in regards to funding opportunities through council. Will this be solely specific to this one group now that we're asking them to fill in additional paperwork? And just wondering if that is the case, will there be relevant support or guidance into how to carry out these actions there? Is just my first question. And then if there is, if I could get an answer to that, Chair, then I might just like to come back in, if that's okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Keith. Alderman Hussey, Derek.
Thank you for allowing me in, Chair. I'm not a member of committee, as you know. I am a former member of the group, and I'm still a member of an old boys association with that group, but we're separate organisations. Chair, I have had opportunity to engage with one of the main organisers of the event on the recommendations. There's a general acceptance, but a surprise, because of course the group already do submit those particular items: an action plan, communications plan, risk assessment. So they're content that those particular items would be adapted. In fact, probably just an extra section into each of those relative to the nature of the type of incident. I can't propose, but would be very content to if I was, and will support it when it comes to full council. I think this is the second investigation that has been undertaken into this. It's been taken by officers not associated with the previous granting of the funds from the various programs, etc. And we have the report in front of us. So I would trust that committee will recognise the integrity of our own officers in producing the recommendations. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Derek. Alderman Guy, Darren.
You, Chair, for letting me in, and I would just like to concur with what Alderman Hussey has said. I believe that the investigation has been thorough enough now, carried out by officers who aren't linked to the funding, etc. And the band seem happy enough as well with the outcome, and realise there will be stipulations probably going forward. I have no problem proposing that we accept these recommendations. Thank you, Chair.
Thanking you, Darren, and obviously note that you have proposed the recommendations.
I'm happy to second it, Chair, if you require a seconder at this stage. Thank you, Alderman Kerrigan here.
I just see an or indicated. I appreciate that, Alderman Kerrigan. I've just noted another speaker in terms of Councillor Tierney, Brian.
Chair, thank you, and thanks to Barry and all of the officers that were involved in preparing this paper for us. I was one of the councillors when this issue was presented to us a number of months ago, that asked could we go back and do further investigations, and I think this paper actually answers a lot of the questions that we actually had then, but it does leave one further question in my mind, and recommendation at 5.2, informing Castledare young loyalists that an action plan, communications plan, and a specific risk assessment will be required. Those are required anyway, so I don't see why that is a recommendation. I know it says specific risk assessment in relation to the sectarian incident which took place, which shouldn't have taken place. But a lot of this is stuff that they should already be doing anyway. And as I understand it, listening to Alderman Hussey, who obviously has more knowledge of this group than what I do, they already do provide this information. So why would it be included in the recommendation if it's something that they already do? And I'm not shocked to hear Alderman Hussey say that the group are content to abide by this recommendation because they already do it anyway. So I'm a bit puzzled as to why that is included, or is it a communications and action plan around how they're going to prevent further sectarian incidents? And if that is the case, then listening to Alderman Hussey, it doesn't sound as if the group are aware that it is specifically around preventing the sectarian incidents which took place in July. And I think that needs communicated to the group. Thank you.
Thank you, Brian. Two further speakers, and then I'll go back to council officers in relation to some of the queries. Councillor McHugh, Rory.
Good Chair, thank you. I also welcome the report from officers. Like Councillor Hussey, I'm not in this committee either, but as the councillor who first raised this, I felt it necessary to comment on it again. Councillor Hussey, or sorry, Alderman Hussey is quite right. This is the second investigation, and I'm quite glad that there has been a second investigation, because it's established essentially what I had alleged had happened, and it merely confirms that no apology was made at the time. And regarding the member of the organisers saying that they had apologised directly to nationalist representatives and to council officers, and had asked nationalist representatives to convey those apologies to them, you know, Chair, it's not the onus of apology doesn't fall on nationalist councillors to convey an apology from Castlereagh Young Loyalists to the nationalist community. Castlereagh Young Loyalists should have took the opportunity at the outset to apologise publicly, and perhaps we mightn't be where we are at today. There's other issues in the report that I'd like to comment on. The issue of there being no complaints to the PSNI. I don't think it's neither here nor there regarding, or how many complaints there was to the PSNI regards an outcome of a recommendation to this report. I think the fact that there was no complaints to the PSNI is probably says more about the confidence in policing from the Nationalist Republican community in Castlereagh, given their experience of previous investigations by policing authorities. But that's not a matter for this committee either. Regarding the flags, as I stated before, it's not plausible, the explanation from Castlereagh Young Loyalists, in my opinion, that, people unknown to them erected flags with the name of their band on them in the car park where they were holding their event, and is adjacent to where they based themselves in Castlereagh Orange Hall. So, it's simply not possible. And I think, to use a famous political phrase, they're being a bit economical with the truth in this instance. I do welcome the fact that they've held their hands up to say that the transgressions that I had documented in previous meetings have indeed taken place, and there was up to 3 songs and derogatory comments. I would beg to differ with the use of the word derogatory. There were sectarian comments, and council have a clear position on sectarianism. We're against sectarian, and we abhor it in all its instances. To me, this is a transgression of our anti-sectarianism policy. The report also says that they have met the terms and conditions of the Good Relations Grant Aid. So I'd like to refer members to the terms and conditions, and it's section 1.12, which states, no aspect of the activity being funded should be party political or promote a particular religion and intention, use or presentation are likely to be perceived as discriminatory or failing to afford equality of opportunity to the categories of persons identified in Section 75 of the Northern Ireland Act 1998, namely between persons of different religious belief, political opinion, etc., etc., etc. So, Chair, with that in mind, I would like to remind members of what actually those songs were and what the comments were that were made. And quite clearly, if there's up to 3 songs, well, it transpired over a period of time. It wasn't nipped in the bud. I could understand if it was one isolated incident and somebody under the influence of alcohol roaring out, getting on the stage, whatever, and it was nipped in the bud, the person was removed. But quite clearly, that was not the case. These transgressions transpired over a period of time. The Sash was sung in its full entirety. The Bully Boys was sung in its full entirety. We had references to, and I quote, prods selling lands to Fenians and about burning the Pope on a pyre. Now, we have it there in black and white. The organisers themselves have held their hands up and admitted, transgressions took place. So I don't see how that those transgressions meet that terms and conditions of 1.12 of the grant funding terms and conditions. So not on this committee, Chair, but it's safe to say, while I acknowledge the officers were limited in what they could investigate, I totally accept that. But I can't in good conscience, when it comes to full council, support the entirety of the £4,000 being allocated to this event, because in my opinion it breaches the terms and conditions. And if I was on this committee, I would be proposing that a percentage of the funding would be withheld, given the transgressions that did take place. Whether that's the entirety of the £1,500 allocated to the musical aspect or a portion of it. I'm not sure if there was music on each of the 3 nights, but certainly that's something I would be doing if I was in the committee, but I'm not on the committee. Cormac, Chair.
Thank you, Rory. Councillor Ferguson, Rachel.
Chair, thank you, and thanks to the officers for the report. Again, I was at the last committee when the report came forward, and there were a number of questions which do seem to be answered through this investigation. I note Councillor McHugh's proposal before, but I do think, Chair, that this was a group that had put together an event, and someone outside of the organisers has got up and done these songs, and I fully agree this shouldn't have happened. It was a good relations issue, and it needed to be properly investigated rather than the previous report, which was just a simple conversation. And I think it's clear here that council officers have looked at everything that was raised on that meeting, and they've brought back what I think is a reasonable way forward. I do note that the Young Loyalists have had previous events which have gone really, really well, and I noted at the last meeting where the first non-bonfire meeting in Castledarg that I met, the fact that it was a really good day and trying to do cross community work. So, Chair, I'm happy with the report. I'm happy with the warning letter. I do understand the worries around the communication plans and the risk assessment already being in place, but it does say it there very clearly that in the event that this type of incident happens again, that there wouldn't be the funding will be withheld. I think we try and move forward with a solution and a compromise here where we understand that the organisers didn't organise to have derogatory comments or music, but unfortunately this has happened, so now it's up to them to provide a way forward and a risk assessment to show that that won't happen again. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Rachel. Coming on again to Alderman Derek Hussey, but Derek, before I just bring you in, I just noticed following that is Councillor Duffy happy to make that a proposal. If there's a proposal there, Sandra, it needs to be written up or written out. Alderman Hussey, Derek.
Thank you. It's just one thing I want to challenge. Again, I'm not a member of the committee, but neither is Councillor McHugh. Councillor McHugh has referred to the sash as a sectarian song. Well, I would challenge anyone to find anything sectarian in the words of the sash. And if you wish, I will sing it or I will type it into the chat box.
Second, Jack. Councillor Duffy.
Sorry, Chair, I'm just typing in the chat box. If you give me a second.
When I come back to you, okay.
Yeah, fine.
Kerrigan, Keith.
Thank you very much, Chair. Just points of clarification there. Yes, as far as I'm aware, there was music there was musical acts on the 3 days, on the Friday night, on the Saturday night, and on the Monday. And as far as I'm aware, I know from speaking to the organisers, the individual in question who has stepped out of line here and has acted up has very much blotted his own copybook, and again, they were not hired by the band. They were not the act that was booked. They seemed to be a tag on that came with the act that was booked on the Friday night. So they weren't actually hired in by the organisers. It was they were just seemed to be added on and just seemed to attend of their own will. So it wasn't there was that issue that they were not the engaged act by the organisers. Yes, they took to the stage and have done that, but it's that one. And just on a point of clarification as well, I know there's the incident or in regards to the flags and the bunting, and the bunting is predominantly, in fact, it is centenary bunting, which is throughout that area of the town. But again, it's not all within the car park, and it is across 8 lampposts, 4 of which are under council's control, but 4 of which are under DFI Road Services control. And I'm sure if we look right across the city and district, there are a lot of DFI lampposts out and around this country in this city and district which have stuff erected on them which would not have appropriate permissions. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Alderman Kerrigan. Councillor Duffy, I see your proposal in the chat box. Do you want to speak to it at this stage?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. And I don't think that I have much else to say because Councillor McHugh has covered the issues that we have seen and the issues have come through in the report. I would just like to highlight again, we do have a 0 tolerance of sectarianism in our policy, and if we don't address that, then we're just making a rod for our own back for next year. The recommendations in the report, in my view, are just as is. So there's no implications for engaging in this type of sectarian behavior and chanting. So I would like to propose that we withhold the portion of funding that would have went particularly to this act. Thank you.
Okay, and I see that the proposal is seconded by Councillor McGinley. I have a couple of other indicated speakers. Councillor Moo. Rory.
Thanks, Chair. Chair, I just want to come back on what Alderman Hussey had said there. I don't want to get into a slanging match, but I mean, I accept the sash. Essentially, there's nothing directly sectarian in the words of the song, but it refers to obviously the orange sash, which is linked to the Orange Order, and in my opinion, the Orange Order is an overtly sectarian organisation. I mean, I'm a Catholic and I'm banned. I can't join it. And let's remember, this was a good relations event. I don't think the sash is an appropriate song to be played at any good relations event. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Rory. Councillor Edwards, Stephen.
Chair, thanks for bringing me in on this. I think it is abhorrent what we're hearing tonight, and I know from people contacting me in Castlereagh as well that a lot of people are annoyed by this, Chair. But I'm just wondering, for clarification purposes, what proportion of the funding is being withheld, and do we know exactly, for example, what went to the? I think they were talked there about the music and the act that was playing. Do we know exactly what proportion went to that act? So if this proposal was going ahead, we know what proportion would be deducted. Thanks, Chair.
Thanking you, Councillor Edwards. Thank you, Stephen. We'll go back to bearing in mind there is a proposal proposed and seconded, but there's a number of queries there and asked by councillors. I'm going to go back to officers, but I just see Councillor Tierney coming on there. So Brian, I'll take yourself, go back to officers as well, and then go back to officers.
Chair, thank you.
Councillor Tierney.
Yep, Chair, thank you for allowing me on. Chair, I've just one small point, but I think very important point in relation to the proposal that's before us. Can we do this legally? Whenever we look through all of the investigations, people are saying there was 2 investigations. I don't think there was 2. I think the first one was a conversation as opposed to an investigation, and I think a lot of the questions, as I've said already, have been answered, but I don't think it's factually right to say that there's 2 investigations. But I would have concerns around doing this from a legal aspect. Yes, what happened shouldn't have happened, and I'm sure there's a lot of people within the Castledare community who are rightly annoyed about this. But can we do this legally? Does it fall within the terms and conditions of the funding that was awarded to them? Or are we possibly, by supporting this proposal, could we be in breach of contract by doing this? So I would like to get those questions answered from a legal perspective before we take this proposal forward, Chair.
Okay, and I'm conscious Alderman Devaney's looking in. I'll come back to you, Morris, but given the question in terms of legal question, so I'll go back to the officer corps.
Chair, I'm happy to take the last question, Councillor Tierney's question, if you wish, and just refer members to paragraph 3.9 of the report. That my department has looked at the terms and conditions of the grant aid in light of the outcome of the investigation, and looked at the whole thing holistically and have formed the view that there are no grounds upon which it would be possible to withhold the funding on this occasion, and that the recommendations of the report have been done in consultation with legal services.
Can you, Philip, Alderman Devaney, Morris?
And look, the question asked before was the one that I was just about to ask. Legally, can we do that? And I thank Philip for that, the conversation, the legal advice that there are no grounds here. And I do believe, Chair, and I just want to put on record, I know some, Councillor McHugh said that the Orange Order as secretary, and I'm a member of that organisation, a very proud member of it, and I would not say that I am sectarian. And he talks about Catholics can't join it. There are many organisations, number of organisations out there that Protestants can't join, AOH and others, Chair. And if we want to go down that road, we could stay all night. But Chair, as far as the proposal is concerned here, Chair, we would not be supporting it, and definitely not, in light of the legal advice here. I think that legal advice should be heeded, Chair. Thank you.
Thanking you, Morris. I have Councillor Hugh. Bear in mind we have a proposal on the floor, proposed and seconded, which I'm going to come to in a minute. Councillor McHugh, Rory.
Thanks again, Chair, for letting me back in. I'll try to be as brief as possible. Chair, I have to be honest and say I'm disappointed by the interpretation from our legal representative there. I would like to just ask for clarity. I mean, 1.12 of the terms and conditions, I'll repeat it again, no aspect of the activity being funded should be party political or promote a particular religion and intention. use or presentation are likely to be perceived as discriminatory or failing to afford equality of opportunity to the categories and Section 75 of the Northern Act 1998. So I'd like to ask our legal representative, singing up to our knees in Fenian blood, about burning the Pope on a pyre and condemning Protestants for selling land to Catholics. Does that concur with the terms and conditions under 1.12? Because to me, that's a clear breach.
Thanking you, Rory. Alderman Guy, Aaron.
Thank you, Chair, for that, man. Look, just going back, I wasn't there that night, but according to Councillor McHugh, the order was the sash, Billy Boys, and something about a pyre. In 3.1, it states that on two occasions, obviously it was the sash was sung the whole way through. The next song was the Billy Boys, which was pulled. The sound was pulled during the song, so there was an attempt made to stop it. And on 3.2, on the third occasion when this person took over the mic again, the music was pulled. So I think that indicates that there was attempts made, especially when there was, as Councillor McHugh says, sectarian songs, maybe 2, definitely not 3. 3.9, I think, clears it up for us all. It's there, black and white. It's legal wording, and I think that's what we have to go with. I think people are just trying to drag this out for their own initiatives. Thanks, Chair.
Thanking you, Darren. Alderman Hussey, Derek.
I will be very brief, Chair, and thank you for the opportunity. I note in the proposed amendment to the initial proposal, the funding identified for this act. I think people should not lose sight of the fact that the individual who undertook these couple of songs was not a booked and approved act and was therefore not being paid. Thank you.
Thanking you, Derek. Folks, I'm going to move shortly to a vote, but I'm conscious that Councillor McHugh asked a direct question. City Solicitor, Philip.
Thanks, Chair. I had a brief connection issue just whilst Councillor McHugh was speaking, but I think before I lost connection, I had picked up on it, but if I didn't, I'm sure, Chair, I can be corrected. The wording of the document is that the council will not fund activity which is sectarian. That's a rough paraphrase of it. The investigation indicates that none of that it was not the organised events that were being funded that were the issue that arose here, and it also suggested that the organisers did take steps to try and remedy the situation. Now, the officers have identified in the report areas for improvement for future events, but we could not see any basis upon which any of the organised events could have funding withdrawn on the basis of the terminology of the letter of offer on this occasion.
Chair.
Councillor McHugh, very quickly.
Chair, with respect to Philip, he hasn't answered the question. The question I had put to him was, how does the incidences that I outlined previously tally with 1.12 of the terms and conditions? Does he think that that those transgressions, the sectarian nature of the songs and comments, Does he think that meets the threshold of 1.12? I certainly don't, and I don't think any right-thinking person reading it would agree that it does either.
Thanking you, Rory. Councillor Tierney, and I am moving to this vote shortly, folks. Councillor Tierney, Brian.
Chair, thank you for allowing me back on. And I listened. I hope I listened very carefully to what Philip had outlined there in relation to the organised events that he spoke about, and I appreciate that. You know, this was, or we've been led to believe that this was some type of rogue who made their way onto the stage and at least two different occasions managed to get hold of a microphone and managed to sing on the first occasion, as I understand it, a song, a sectarian song, and midway through the second song, the sound was pulled. And I appreciate what Philip's saying around the organisers of the event, and it may not have been anyone who was directly involved in the event, but the reality still stands that it is the responsibility of the organisers to ensure that no one who shouldn't be on the stage can get on the stage, certainly shouldn't be able to get hold of a microphone, and shouldn't be able to have the time to perform those types of songs without the permission. Then there was clearly no, could only imagine, no security around the platform where the fella made his way onto the stage. So whilst he may not have been contracted, he may not have been on the bill to say that he was going to be performing that night. And if that's the case, then there was a breach of security at this event, where this gentleman was able to get on the stage and perform these songs. So whilst he may not have been contracted, he may not have been paid for doing it, it's still the responsibility of the organisers to ensure that this doesn't happen. And I think that's where it has fallen down, Chair. So whilst I appreciate what Philip's saying around he may not have been paid, and I've seen some comments on the chat box, they say there'll be invoices and one thing and another. The responsibility, and we can't get away from this, the responsibility still falls on the organisers to ensure that this doesn't happen. And it happened twice on the one night at the one event. So the responsibility falls back to the organisers to ensure that it doesn't happen again. Thank you.
Thank you, Brian. Thank you, Councillor Tierney. If I could ask members, I'm asking the responsible officer to take a vote on the proposal which has been proposed and seconded. Officers.
Chair, point of order. I'm not on the committee, but I just want to point out there was a previous proposal, and my understanding is you can't take a proposal, an amendment, which is essentially what this is. Maybe the legal opinion would clarify that, but there was a proposal from Councillor Alderman Guy, seconded by Alderman Kerrigan, before this other one came on board.
City Solicitor.
Chair, obviously, you know, a proposal, once a proposal is on the floor, a second proposal cannot be taken. But I have heard references to the fact that maybe, whilst it doesn't appear on the screen as such, but that this is intended as an amendment. And if it's an amendment to the proposal, then the correct approach is to take the amendment first, and then, dependent on the outcome of the amendment, to take the substantive proposal thereafter.
Chair, yes, this is an amendment to the recommendation set out in the report.
Okay. Could I ask the responsible officer to...
Chair, sorry, Chair, apologies. Just before you do take it then, if it's an amendment, what is it amending, or is it removing 5.1 and 5.2 and replacing it with a text that's on screen? Or is it adding in it, or what's it doing?
Now, give me a second. It's removing 5.1.
Okay, can I ask the responsible officer to take a vote on the amendment, please?
Okay, thanks, Chair. So, Alderman Devaney,
Against?
Alderman Kerrigan,
Against. Alderman Guy as present.
oh, sorry, Alderman Guy. Alderman Guy,
Against.
Councillor Sonoya Bauer,
Oh.
4, yes. Councillor Michaela Boyle, apologies, and Michaela's still not there. Councillor Carr,
4.
Councillor Duffy,
4.
Councillor Edwards,
4, Karen.
Councillor Farrell,
4.
Councillor Ferguson,
Against, Karen.
Councillor Fleming, Councillor Fleming. Come back, I'm just not sure if he's lost connection. Councillor Harkin,
4.
Councillor McGinley,
4, Karen.
and Councillor Tierney.
4, Karen.
Okay, and can I just check, Councillor Fleming, did you record a vote?
Sorry, Karen. 4.
4, right, okay, thank you, thanks. Members, I make that 9 for, 4 against, and no abstentions.
Karen, could I see the substantial motion now then?
Okay, Chair, so I'll just commence with the vote again. So,
Chair, just before Karen takes a vote, just clarification on what we are voting on now. This is the removal of 5.1 on the recommendation, and the we don't have a figure as to how much the sum is to be reduced by. Is that correct?
City Solicitor?
Chair, the amendment's been passed, and therefore it's now the amended proposal. And the amended proposal is, as appears on screen, to remove 5.1 of the original proposal, to insert the wording which is then on the screen. And the original proposal was also to accept recommendation 5.2. So that's the substantive proposal in the absence of any further amendment.
Chair, are you happy I proceed?
Substantive proposal, but I see is that members coming in seeking question on something? No.
No, I don't think so.
Chair, I think Alderman Guy was looking to get in there. I'd seen his name popping up.
This thing of mine seems to be a bit frozen.
Is it okay for me to go ahead, Chair?
Yeah.
Is that okay, Chair? Yep. Just breaking up there a bit. go ahead. Right? Could I ask Philip, is this proposal ignoring the previous legal advice that was given by yourself? Thanks, Chair.
Chair,
Sorry, Darren,
it's not
go
for me
ahead.
to
Can you-
comment on what members' view of the legal advice. Sorry, Chair, if you're happy for me to go ahead, it's not for me to comment on what view members are taking of the legal advice which has been received. As an officer, it's my obligation to advise to the best of my ability, and it's then up to members what they make of that.
Okay, appreciate that, City Solicitor. Okay, Karen, would you take the vote, please?
Okay, Chair, so Alderman Devaney,
Against, because of the legal advice.
Alderman Guy, Alderman Guy. Okay.
Yeah.
Against, yes.
It's against, yeah.
Okay. Alderman Kerrigan,
Against, Karen.
Councillor Sonoya Bauer,
For Karen.
Councillor Michaela Boyle wasn't present at last, still no change. Councillor Carr,
For.
Councillor Duffy,
For.
Councillor Edwards,
For Karen.
Councillor Farrell,
For.
Councillor Ferguson,
Against, Karen.
Councillor Fleming,
For Karen.
Councillor Harkin,
For.
Councillor McGinley,
For Karen.
and Councillor Tierney.
For Karen.
Okay. Chair, then the record is 9 for, 4 against, and no abstentions.
Okay, Karen, thanking you. Members, that's nearly half, well, 25 past 6. So I'm going to take a 10-minute break and then come back and we get them off. So if we come back for 25 to 7, please. Thank you. Hello, Karen.
Yes, Chairman, I'm here.
Are you ready to go? Aye, Officer Corps.
Yeah, I'm here. Yeah.
Okay, members, if we could resume the meeting now, and hopefully everybody's back on. That was finished off item 12, members, and the next number of items from number 13 to number 20 are for matters of information. But if anybody wants to speak to any of them, if they would let me know now in the chat box. If not, could I have a proposal to end the confidential?
Proposed, Alderman Devaney.
Chair, item 13.
Sorry, Morris, thanks. I
Sorry.
will come back to that, Morris, but Alderman Hussey, item 13.
Sorry, I had it in the chat box there, but it hasn't gone through to everyone.
That's okay.
Just item 13 to welcome that. As you know, that's something that rural councillors are passionate about, that we have access to, equality of access to various programs, and the NRA active citizenship through sport program were of course very welcome, but we were keen that this would also be available to the rural area, and I thank officers who have put together hopefully what will be a program that can be funded and can give access to the active citizenship for those in the rural area. It's a very welcome report. Thank you, Chair.
Thanking you, Derek. Morris, if he's still content.
Yep. I'll still propose, Chair, that we move on to confidential. Yep.
Seconder, please.
Brian Tierney.
Thank you, Councillor Tierney. Thank you, Brian. Moving on to